Okay, it's 5 after. Let's go ahead and we'll get started. We'll start a little slowly so people can get in and they won't miss too much. So welcome everybody. My name is Stephen Taylor. I'm from the Idaho State Tax Commission, the Education and Outreach Coordinator. And today we're going to walk through the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit Program. This is an opportunity for us to tell you what it is that we know about this program and how we expect it to go. This is also a great opportunity for you to be able to ask questions about it, okay? That's perfect, Kara. I hope I said that correctly. So, what is the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit Program? This was enacted this year, and it provides nearly $50 million in state funds to help families cover the costs of qualifying education expenses for students who are not enrolled in public schools. It is a refundable tax credit program, and it's going to go to full-time Idaho residents to pay for qualifying non-public school expenses for Idaho K through 12 students ages 5 to 18, and for Idaho students age 5 to 21 who have a qualifying disability and who require ancillary support. Now, this program is going to allow parents to apply for a parental choice tax credit or a one-time advance payment of up to $5,000 for each eligible student, or up to $7,500 for each eligible student with a qualifying disability. An eligible student must be no younger than 5 and no older than 18 as of December 31st of the tax year. So an eligible student with a qualifying disability must be no younger than 5 and no older than 21 as of December 31st for the tax year. And I've lost my mouse cursor. There it is. So, this thing is a refundable tax credit, and it does allow parents to apply for this credit of $5,000 for each eligible student or $7,500 for each eligible student with a qualifying disability. So that's what we're talking about, okay? It does require that parents with a modified adjusted income not exceeding 300% of the federal poverty level get priority. And to determine this, we're going to be using the 2024 federal poverty level numbers. And if you need to know what those numbers are, they are actually on our FAQ. So there you go, that's my first reference to the FAQ. You'll be able to click on the link that's in the FAQ and pull those numbers up. Okay. Applications are going to be reviewed on a first-come, first-served basis, and nobody is guaranteed to get it. Okay. Now, that was for the Parental Choice Tax Credit. There's also the advance payment. The advance payment is a one-time payment that, if it's funded, you can use to pay for expected qualifying expenses related to non-public academic instruction for an eligible student. The amount of the advance payment is also $5,000 per eligible student, or up to $7,500 for each eligible student with a qualifying disability. And just like the tax credit, nobody is guaranteed to get this either. To be considered for the advance payment for 2026, a parent's modified adjusted gross income can't exceed 300% of the 2024 federal poverty level. Now, to find your modified adjusted gross income, you're going to want to look at line 7 of your 2024 Form 40. It's the Idaho Individual Income Tax Return. So also, you, your student, and the non-public instruction must meet the criteria. I thought I heard something. Must meet all the other criteria that exist in the Parental Choice Tax Credit Program. So we're still talking about the advance payment. If you are awarded the advance payment for 2026, you have to save your receipts for actual qualifying expenses that you paid and submit the receipts to us by December 1st of 2027 for reconciliation. Any funds from the advance payment that you didn't use for qualifying expenses in 2026 must be repaid back to the Tax Commission. So you are going to want to keep all of your receipts. Let's see here. Again, I have to ignore questions. So, let's prepare to apply for the tax credit or the advance payment. These are the things that you need to be aware of right away. So there's basically 3 of them, okay? The first one is to carefully read the FAQs to ensure that you and your potential expenses qualify, okay? The FAQs that I'm going to direct you to are updated on almost a daily basis right now. So as we get more information in or we get clarification, it goes to the FAQs. So I'm going to refer you to that a lot, okay? So by November 1st of 2025, let's make sure that you have filed the 2024 Form 40, Idaho Individual Income Tax Return. You're going to have to submit a return even if Idaho doesn't normally require you to submit one. And we are going to go through this process here just a little bit with Janet and with Mark. If you normally file a 1040 or a Form 40, sorry, if you normally file one, then you're not going to have to worry about it because you already have one on file. But if you don't normally file one, then you're going to need to do that, okay? And we're going to walk through that process here in just a little bit. Excuse me. Now, by December 1st of 2025, I want you to make sure that you've registered for an individual TAP account. And you'll do that at tax.idaho.gov/new TAP, okay? And be aware that it can take up to 14 days for this to complete. So I'd want you to get that done as soon as possible, okay? If you haven't filed an individual income tax return in 2024, you need to do that first because we have to have that in order to create the TAP account. So these are all interconnected, okay? And then the third thing is to start saving receipts for qualified expenses. Okay? You are going to have to submit those, so I want you to save any receipt that you think will be a qualifying expense. I'm going to say this a bunch as we go through this, but if you think you're going to get $5,000 tax credit, I would save at least $5,000 worth of receipts. I wouldn't even limit it to that. I would save every receipt that might be a qualified expense, even if it exceeds the $5,000, because you're going to submit them, and some of those might not be qualified expenses. So I want you to save every receipt that you think might be that way. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. So a more complete timeline here. We've already talked about filing a Form 40. You need to get that done by November 1st if you haven't done one already. By December 1st, make sure you have a TAP account, because on January 15th, that is the first day that you can apply. And it opens up for everybody on January 15th. March 15th is the last day to apply. To be honest, I would not wait until March 15th unless you absolutely have to, because this is a first come, first serve, and we are going to take it from the TAP registration pages. If you wait until March 15th, you may be out of luck. So I would try to get it done as soon as possible. On April 15th, we're going to notify parents of whether or not they've received the Parental Choice Tax Credit, the advance payment, or both. And then we haven't quite determined this part yet, but we might reopen the application process if there are any funds remaining after the initial enrollment period. Okay. So November 1st, get a Form 40. December 1st, get a TAP account. January 15th, start applying. You have until March 15th to do that. I would probably not wait until this date. On April 15th is when we start letting people know whether they got it or not. Okay? Yeah, the filing deadline for 2025 tax returns is April 15th. I'm going to recommend that you file your return anyway, even if you think you might be awarded the Parental Choice Tax Credit. Just file anyway, just to avoid any potential penalty and interest, because we are not going to know if you get it or not until April 15th. Okay. If you do receive the Parental Choice Tax Credit, you can just file an amended return. Okay. That way you don't accrue any additional penalty and interest. Okay. What else we got here? Another question that we get quite often is this a voucher program? We've seen a lot of school voucher programs come and go in various states. This is not one of them. Once we award the Parental Choice Tax Credit or the advance payment through the application process, it goes directly to the parent, the guardian, or foster parent of the eligible student. It does not go to the education facility. Do we have to be Idaho residents? Yes. To be eligible as a parent, you and your eligible children, have to be full-time residents. You must be full-time residents in 2024 and in 2025 to apply. And as I've mentioned several times now, you also have to have filed a 2024 Form 40. Okay. And in that Form 40, you have to have the children listed as dependents. Okay. Another big one that we get a lot of, what are qualifying expenses or qualified expenses? These include tuition to a non-public school or fees for a base curriculum that covers, at a minimum, these 4 core subjects. If you're buying curriculum, it has to include English language arts, it has to include mathematics, it has to include science, and it has to include social studies. If you're paying for a tuition for a non-public school, the tuition will cover all of those things. Okay. These expenses would also include expenses related to the 4 core subjects. And unlike Empowering Parents grants, qualifying expenses don't include expenses for extracurricular or non-academic activities. I think I just answered a question. Okay. So there's going to be some differentiation here. A tuition is going to cover everything that's included in that non-public school. So let's say you've signed up for a non-public school. I don't really know a lot of them here, but if you signed up for one and they charge you tuition for the school year, that tuition covers everything that is covered. If you are going to do homeschooling or pod schooling with other parents, and you are buying a curriculum, that curriculum that you purchase has to include those 4 core subjects, and the expense for those 4 core subjects is covered. If you're buying a curriculum and you start buying other portions like music or foreign languages or other things like that that are not in those 4 core subjects, those other things are probably not going to be qualified expenses. Okay? Now, it's not possible to it is not possible to complete a list of qualified expenses. There's just too many. So when you're considering purchases to submit, if you're awarded the credit or advance payment, remember that these expenses must be directly related to the education of the eligible student. They have to be reasonable and necessary to fulfill the requirements of academic instruction. If you want more information about this, we're going to have more information on our FAQ page. I know there's going to be a lot of questions about, well, what if we buy this, or what if we buy this, or what about this specific thing that we purchase? We may not be able to answer that. It doesn't mean we're not going to look at the question, but just be prepared that we may not be able to answer that question for you, okay? So some examples of things that might qualify. School tuition or fees that include English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies, the 4 core subjects at a minimum. A base curriculum that includes those 4 core subjects at a minimum. Textbooks for the 4 core subjects. Tutoring for the 4 core subjects. Any courses associated with nationally standardized assessments, and transportation. Some examples of things that are probably not going to qualify. Expenses, or just won't. Expenses for anyone who is not qualified for the Parental Choice Tax Credit or advance payment. Extracurricular or non-academic activities outside of the 4 core subjects. Homeschool academic instruction that a parent provides. Okay. Dual credit courses for college classes taken in high school. Vacations, uniforms, big screen TVs, because somebody asked us, gaming computers, vehicles, entertainment, all of those are not going to qualify. What else we got here? So, specific to homeschooling and qualified expenses. Things that could qualify. Materials such as textbooks and curricula for the 4 core subjects. Things that are probably not going to qualify. Fees for instruction that a parent provides. It is specifically written in the law that a parent providing instruction to their child for homeschooling, any fees that they are getting paid to do this will not be qualified expenses. And these qualifying expenses can only include academic expenses in the 4 core subject areas. The Parental Choice Tax Credit does not cover expenses for any extracurricular activities or non-academic activities. So, how are we going to track these? Or how are you going to track these? So as we've mentioned, to apply for the Parental Choice Tax Credit, you're going to need to keep your receipts of expenses paid in 2025 to your current non-public school or for expenses that you paid for homeschooling instruction. Okay. To apply for the advance payment, you're going to need to estimate your expected expenses for the year 2026. So this means you're going to need to keep your receipts. They don't have to be paper. I would probably make it would be easier for me if I was doing this to scan in my receipts and keep them as a digital file. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. So this, what if my eligible child's non-public school doesn't include the required core subjects? To qualify for the Parental Choice Tax Credit or for the advance payment, academic instruction for eligible students has to include those 4 core subjects at a minimum. If they do not include those 4 core subjects, then it's not going to be reimbursable. You won't be able to use it. What if my non-public school isn't accredited? It is not. It does not automatically exempt it. If your non-public school that your child is attending isn't accredited, then what you're going to need to do is document their growth as a student using a portfolio of evidence or a learning record. We used to call them grades. But keep track of that information that says, hey, my student is progressing, and here's the evidence of that. Okay? What if my expenses don't qualify? If you're awarded the Parental Choice Tax Credit, you're going to have to submit your receipts when you file your 2025 income tax return. You're only going to receive credit for qualifying expenses that you properly document with the receipts. Like I said earlier, I would submit more. If I got $5,000 and I had $7,500 worth of expenses that I think might qualify, I would submit them all. Okay? For the advance payment, you're going to have to provide receipts to prove that you spent the money you received for qualifying expenses. You're going to have to repay any money that you spent on non-qualifying expenses or on qualifying expenses without proper receipts. We're still talking about if your expenses don't qualify. You're going to have to repay any money that you spent outside of the provisions of the law. We don't have any leeway in this. There may be a financial penalty and interest that might apply. If you received a Parental Choice Tax Credit or the advance payment and are found to have willfully provided false information to obtain them, that is considered tax fraud. And that means that civil and criminal penalties up to felony charges might apply. Okay? Another one that we get is my school non-public? Well, a non-public school means a private school, a micro school, a learning pod that provides academic instruction to eligible students. Non-public academic instruction can be delivered in person, it can be online, it can be virtual, or through a combination of any of those methods. A non-public school is going to charge tuition. A public school doesn't. For example, students who attend the public schools like the Idaho Home Learning Academy or the Idaho Virtual Academy are not eligible for the Parental Choice Tax Credit or the advance payment because those are public schools. If you are not sure, I would talk to the school and ask them, is this a private school? Is this a non-public school? They'll be able to tell you that. And if you aren't sure, go ahead and reach out to us. Okay? So, using public school amenities. The whole point behind this is this is for money for people who do not use public school amenities. You cannot claim the Parental Choice Tax Credit or use the advance payment for any semester where your student was enrolled in a public school for any reason. If you're not sure if you're enrolled, check with the school. We get this question a lot, well, what about sports? Some schools, if you are signed up for sports or extracurriculars through that school, they consider that an enrollment for the school. If you are considered enrolled in that school, you cannot claim the Parental Choice Tax Credit or the advance payment. And the easiest way to check this is to check with the school. The law specifically states that eligible students can't be enrolled full-time or part-time in a public school, a public charter school, a public virtual charter school, a public magnet school, or part-time kindergarten. It is very clear on that. And since it's very clear, this is what we have to follow. So, question is, why do I have to file an Idaho tax return? This looks like a fantastic place for Mark to start doing his side of the presentation. Mark Smith is one of our subject matter experts here at the Idaho State Tax Commission. He deals a lot in the tax returns. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Mark, I'm going to give him the presenter ball, and he can walk through this section. Give me just a sec, Mark. Here you go.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
So why do I have to file an Idaho tax return? 2024 Form 40 individual tax return is part of the qualification process, and we will use your return to create an individual tax account if you are in our system if this is your first time filing. And we'll need that individual income tax account in our system before you'll be able to register for TAP. And we also use the return to determine if your income exceeds or is below 300% of the federal poverty level. What if I'm not required to file a 2024 Idaho Form 40? Parents must file an Idaho 2024 Form 40 even if they don't have taxable income. We have special filing instructions for those cases, and there you can find those in our FAQ number 7. The return should be filed as soon as possible and no later than November 1st, 2025. Where do I get Form 40? You can get them online, you can get them at one of our offices, or you can call in and we can mail them to you. To get those online, you go to tax.idaho.gov, and on the home page, click Individual Income Tax. On the next page, you'll click Forms. The page will display a list of our individual income tax forms. From the list, you should select Form 40 Individual Income Tax Return 2024. The instructions for Form 40 are located above the return on the same list. If you're not required to file, you should use the special filing instructions included in FAQ number 7. There's also a shortcut. You can enter tax.idaho.gov/IIT forms into your address bar, and it'll go straight to the list of forms. Also pick the forms up at one of our offices. We have offices in Boise, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, and Twin Falls. Our office location and hours are available on our website at tax.idaho.gov. Click Contact Us at the top of our homepage to navigate to our Contact Us webpage. On the left side of the page, select office location and hours to view the list as shown on this slide. You can also get forms by contacting us. We will mail them to you if you call us. Our Boise area office phone number is 208-334-7660. Our toll-free number is 800-972-7660. And the number for Idaho Relay Service for hearing impaired callers is 800-377-3529. Our call center hours are 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Our call center is closed 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time on the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month. How do I file? You should write Parental Choice at the top of the completed form. We recommend dropping your return into the drop box located at one of our offices or mailing us your return certified mail. Our mailing address is Idaho State Tax Commission, P.O. Box 56, Boise, Idaho, 83756-0056. And one of the questions we get is, if I've already filed, do I need to file again using this information? No, if you've already filed a 2024 Idaho Form 40, you don't need to file again. At this point, we'll turn it over to Janet for the TAP registration portion.
Thanks, Mark. There you go, Janet.
Okay, thanks, Steve. All right, so we've talked about keeping receipts, qualified expenses, and Mark's talked about filing your 2024. One of your last steps is this is going to be an online application. Will be the only way that you will be able to apply for it. So in order to get your Parental Choice Tax Credit, you'll want to go into one of the two options. To start with, your shortcut for this is the tax.idaho.gov/new-tap. And once you get in there, you're going to have a choice of a couple of different things. You will be able to either take a same-day quiz, and there are some requirements for that, or barring those requirements, you can receive a registration code be sent to you in a letter. And in order to do that, so if we take the same day quiz, some of the requirements are, number one, you're going to have had to have filed a tax return with the state of Idaho that has what we would call a tax value on it, and I'll show you that on the next screen. It cannot be a zero value filed return for it to register. But if you don't have a TAP account and you go to this shortcut, if we take same day quiz, your first screen is going to be this registration information. It's going to ask if you're a third party. And because our TAP is used very widely for individuals and businesses, you are going to answer no, you are not a third party reporter. And it'll take you to the next screen and it'll ask you, you'll choose Social Security number, and you'll see the little red asterisk. Those are required fields that you have to enter in there. And you'll see at the bottom when it comes to your zip code, it's asking for a location zip code. Generally doesn't mean a lot unless you have a location zip code and then you have a mailing address, maybe to a P.O. box. You want to put in your location zip code. Once you do that and you enter in that information, it's going to bring you to this screen. And earlier when I had mentioned a zero value or zero, I won't say zero value, zero tax owed. And if you look at this example here, if you have a zero on that line, on your tax return, you're going to need to request a registration code be mailed to you, and which is fine because that works the same way. You're going to get your TAP account. However, if the one I found happened to have an amount on it, so I was able to enter in individual income tax, and I did it for the year 2024 because that is what we're looking at, and I was able to put an amount in that next prompt. It was able to match up with what we showed on our records with that particular taxpayer. So by entering that in, it took me basically the very next screen that is your TAP login information. You're going to set your username, your password, and all the questions that it prompts you, and you have completed your TAP account. And so you'll be ready to apply once January 15th rolls around. Now, if you have not been required, and as Mark mentioned, we have special instructions for that on the FAQs, and that line in that display is 0, you are going to need to request a TAP registration code through the mail. And it's same kind of process. It takes a little bit longer. That's why we're telling you, get on it December 1st, because it does go through the mail. So on that very first screen where you had the option of the 2, now we've taken the second option of receiving a letter for your registration. Same question, are you a third party? No, you are not going to be a third party at any time. Same kind of screen on the next one. Social Security number, the red asterisks are required fields. And once you enter that in and you hit next, instead of taking you into the login information, it brings you to this confirmation. I would print off the confirmation just to keep it so you have it. And once you do that, it's going to send you a letter. And on that letter, we'll have your registration code. You'll go back into this exact same place, only this time you're going to pick the third one that says you already have your registration code. Click here, and it's going to take you to that screen that we looked at a couple of slides back for all your login information. And then you'll get a happy notice that says, thank you for, let me go back one screen. You'll get a letter in the mail that says, thank you for creating your TAP account, or welcome to TAP. I'm not sure of the exact verbiage, but at that point you know that you have completed your TAP registration, and that's a huge part of applying for this parental choice. So just keep that in mind. If you do have any questions, feel free to call in. There's anybody who answers the phone can walk you through this registration and answer any questions. At this point, Steve, you want to take it back?
Sure. I can do that. There's a lot of great questions going in there. I have scanned through them. There's going to be some really good discussion. I'm going to continue with the last bit of this, and then we'll get to those, okay? Let's see, we went there. So, the big questions. When can I apply? So you can apply for the 2025 Parental Tax Credit or the 2026 Advance Payment January 15th, 2026 through March 15th of 2026. You have to apply through TAP, which is why we're telling everybody you have to have an individual TAP account. I want you to remember that this is a first-come, first-served program, so I recommend that you apply as soon as possible. And then, again, just so we're clear, keep your receipts for anything that you think might be a qualifying expense, okay? If you're not sure, keep it anyway, okay? So, again, the law requires us to give priority to parents whose modified adjusted gross income does not exceed 300% of the federal poverty level. We're going to process these applications in the order in which we receive them, and then we're going to place applicants whose modified adjusted gross income exceeds 300% of the federal poverty level on a wait list until we've processed priority applications. We then process waitlisted applications in the order in which we received them. Okay? I know, it sounds a little confusing, but this is just the way we have to do it. We anticipate that we're going to award all of the funds during the initial application process. And I know I've seen some questions about this, and it's just because of the amount of people who are asking questions and some of the data that we've looked at. However, if there are funds that are still available, we're going to reopen the application process. Okay. How that works, I do not know yet. When we figure that part out, it will be on the FAQ. Just for the people who are already typing that question in there. So how do we apply? Well, you're going to apply online to the Tax-Free Access Point, or TAP, that Janet just went through. You're going to need to have a TAP account. So if you don't already have one for individual income tax, I suggest that you register for a TAP account by at least December 1st. Okay. So this is individual income tax. I know that there's been some questions out there about, I already have this for my business, do I need to do it? Go ahead and get one for individual, because that's what it needs to be tied to, is to you, okay? It can take either up to 1 day to 2 weeks to register for that account, depending on circumstances. So plan ahead, and then be aware that we have to have processed at least one of your Idaho returns before you can get a TAP account. So that's where Mark's information came in. Okay. That's why we ask you to do that if you haven't done that already. So, if you need more information about TAP, we have our intro page. You can find that on our tax.idaho.gov. The TAP entrance is right in the bottom dead center where it says TAP. It's a little outline of Idaho. Or you can go to tax.idaho.gov/new TAP. Okay. Is there a limit to how many kids in my family can qualify? Nope, there isn't. You can apply for all of your eligible children in one application. Okay. Can a non-public school be out of state? Yes, as long as that school meets the requirements of the law. If a non-public school that your child is attending isn't accredited, like I mentioned before, you're going to have to document their growth as a student using a portfolio of evidence or a learning record. Okay? Do Empowering Parent Grant funds qualify for this program? No. You can't claim the credit or advance payment for items bought with the Empowering Parents Grant. So anything that you purchase using that money isn't going to qualify. However, if you're using the Idaho Ideal 529 plan, you can use those funds to pay for qualified tuition expenses and still claim the Parental Choice Tax Credit. Okay, so I'm going to be saying this a lot. The most up-to-date, most current information that you can get is on our FAQ page. It is tax.idaho.gov/parental choice credit, all one word. That will take you straight to it. This is where we're going to refer you to a lot. Anytime that any kind of new information, we get new information from the governor, from the legislature, anything that changes will go on the FAQ page first. There's also a newsletter that you can sign up from there. Sign up for that. It is free. We don't sell it to anybody else. We're not going to bombard you with a bunch of junk. But when we have changes, it will go to the newsletter, and then the newsletter gets pushed out to everybody who signed up for it. Also a great way to get information. And then the third thing, if you have questions that aren't answered, or we can't answer, because some of it we just won't be able to, we're going to ask you to send that in an email to parentalchoice@tax.idaho.gov. Those are going to go to the people who are handling all of these questions and who are doing all of the research for this. So that's why we're going to tell you to send that question in an email to that address. So I would write all of this down, okay? tax.idaho.gov/parental choice credit is the website you want to go to. From there, you can sign up for the newsletter. And then the email address that you want to use to send questions about the Parental Choice Tax Credit or the advance payment is parentalchoice@tax.idaho.gov. Okay? I'll leave that for a second for people who are ready. Now here we go. Questions. I have the first round. I've already kind of copied these down, and we'll just start walking through these. I see everybody else has typed in after that. That's why I put a little mark there. I'm going to address this one right here. That Patrick, will you please email this presentation to participants? I will not. And I'm going to tell you why. It's not because I'm rude. It's because it changes constantly. So that we're going to refer you to the FAQ page. It's entirely possible that this information may change this afternoon. And I don't want to send you out a copy of this and then have it be wrong. So instead, I'm going to refer you to the FAQ page because, again, that is where we update everything initially. Okay?
Steve?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Julie. Won't we be replacing the old set of slides with this one, with the PDF?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that will be available, but we won't be sending slide decks to anyone.
Right. And it won't be a PowerPoint, so it will be a PDF. But I do want to caution you, I'll send that out, but that's static, and if anything changes, it will not be reflected in that PDF. So I would still rely on the FAQ page. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Steve,
yes,
sorry. Do you want me to introduce myself before we start questions?
Yeah, please.
I forgot last time, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie Evanson and I'm the Public Information Director. The team that's putting on the webinar today, we are responsible for external communications at the agency, and it will likely be one of my team that responds to you if you send an email, if you watch another webinar, or view a video. So we thank you very much for being here today.
Okay, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
First question, does the program cover kindergarten? Is that considered K through 12?
Yes.
Yep, sure is. On the 2024 poverty level chart, does the total number of dependents include parents and the children?
When you're using the chart, you do need to include family size.
So that's including
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parents and children. So if it's 2 parents and 2 kids, it's family of 4.
Perfect. Thank you. Is the advanced payment program different than the tax credit program? They are 2 different things. They are both part of the Parental Choice Tax Credit program, but they are 2 different things. The advanced payment is an option to get money before you incur the expenses. If you expect to incur these expenses, you can pay them with any money that you got from the advanced payment program. The advanced payment program is only for people who are at or below 300% of the federal poverty level. The tax credit program will be awarded to you as a tax credit, so you can claim this when you file your taxes. That is also available for people who are at or below 300% of the poverty level, but it will also be available if there are funds left over to people who are above the federal poverty, 300% of the federal poverty level. I hope that made sense.
So just for clarification on that, Steve, I think that it's probably, so for folks who are below 300% of the federal poverty level, it's going to work a little bit different. I would encourage everybody to think about this in terms of tax years. That is January 1st through December 31st. We are the Tax Commission, and we're administering the program. So for the folks who apply for the tax credit, you're applying for that credit on the tax return you will be filing for 2025. That means all your expenses and everything that you will have already incurred, you have already paid for. The audit folks want me to make sure I said you paid for it. It's not just what you incur, it's what you've actually paid for and can provide a receipt for in tax year 2025. For those people applying for the advance payment, you are going to have to estimate, do some research, find out what it's going to cost you, and you are going to apply based on what you estimate your expenses are. And we don't have a reconciliation date for you yet, but that will mean that after the year 2026 is over, if you receive the advance payment, you will have to reconcile that with us, and we'll provide additional information to you on the FAQ page as it becomes available to us.
Perfect. I am gathering a couple more questions here for the list. One second. I can't type and talk at the same time. I'm sorry. Okay. Where were we? On the 2024 poverty chart, we already did that one. Oh, there it is. Line 6 on the Form 40 covers dependents. Line 7 is the federal adjusted gross income. I'm not sure if there's a question there. I think that's just a statement.
So, Steve, I think for all of you folks, I think there's a little bit of confusion with the way that the legislation is written, and sometimes they go back and forth. What we're telling you in terms of what line to pull that data from to make the determination, that is line 7 on your Form 40 from 2024. That's what we're going to be looking at the Tax Commission. That's what our system is going to be looking at. So if there's any confusion, I want you to take what you hear today. You're going to look at line 7, and that is the line that you're going to pull your income information from.
Excellent. Okay. Can you confirm that Mathnasium math tutoring will be a qualified expense for parents so that parents know with confidence that they can claim our services as an expense?
No.
Yeah, I know it sounds harsh, but no.
Yeah. So this goes the same for all qualified expenses. I think it's more important that you're looking at it as, is it something related to one of the 4 core subjects, and can you provide documentation? Folks, this is brand new. There are going to be a lot of things that we're going to find out between now and when we roll out the first credits and the first advance payments. So I would encourage you just to document everything, and we are not going to be pre-qualifying expenses, forms, programs. We're just not, we don't have the ability to do that for you, but I would encourage you to use the FAQs as parameters around which you can make determinations that you likely are already making on behalf of your children.
Excellent. So another question. We pulled our kids out of IHLA. Do classes such as music or PE qualify like they did in IHLA?
So we'll go back to what Steve said earlier. The criteria for tax year 2025 is that a student cannot be enrolled. Different schools do it differently. You need to check with the school about whether or not your student was actually enrolled. If they were enrolled in 2025 in one semester or the other, you wouldn't be able to claim that semester if you were awarded the credit. And if there's still some confusion, you can request from the State Board of Education whether or not they have record of your student being enrolled.
Another question here. Oh, yeah, we get this a few times. What happens in future years if I don't get the credit this year? Is priority given to those who receive the credit in the first year, regardless of future AGI changes?
So the priority issue is a little bit tricky. I want you to consider this as an annual application process. The legislation does talk about priority, but truth be told, we haven't actually seen how it's going to work. The likelihood is that it will provide priority for those parents because that's what the legislation says, but the legislature could make changes in January. We just don't know. So we're not able to give any kind of a certain answer on that, but the likelihood is because that's the way the legislation is written, is that parents who are awarded it the first year will receive priority, but the application process is annual, and priority is given to those families that are below the 300% poverty level.
And then, so that leads us to the next one. Why was the 2024 federal poverty levels used for a 2025 tax credit?
Okay, so as a reminder to all the folks, we are the Tax Commission. We look at January 1st through December 31st. So the only way, because nobody's filed anything on 2025, we have to look at 2024. That's our look back year. It is not possible to mix and match, and we have to land on something that you all can count on. So we're still in 2025 right now. Our look back year is 2024, and that's why you have to be a full-time resident for both years. That's why you have to file your 2024 individual income tax, and that's why income tax return, and that's why we're looking at the 2024 poverty level.
Okay, and the next one, I don't think we're going to be able to answer, but what percentage of applicants do you expect there to be funds for?
We have no idea.
Right. This is the first year this has happened. We have absolutely no idea how many people.
But we are required by the legislature to report on that. So as soon as we have data, we're going to start sharing it out with the public.
Yeah. Another one, why are you not using the Idaho Adjusted Gross Income line 11 to determine adjusted gross income for the Idaho state credit?
I think I talked about that a little bit earlier. There are a few things in the bill that created a little bit of confusion about what we needed to do, and the best number that we have is that line 7 in order to be able to match with whether or not we're meeting the legislature's requirement of the 300%. So we are using line 7.
Excellent. We always file an extension for our tax returns and usually file by July. How does that affect our eligibility?
It won't.
Yeah, it just won't. I love simple answers like that. It will not. Okay, so basically homeschoolers are not treated the same.
Okay, so it is very difficult to put together a program that is going to be everything to everyone. So the criteria are the same for both homeschool, non-public school, learning pod, whatever environment you choose. Regardless of the environment that you choose, homeschool or otherwise, you have to have a curriculum that has the 4 basic core classes in it. So if your curriculum that you choose at your non-public school or other learning environment doesn't include those, you won't be able to be eligible. If it does include those, either the base curriculum or in the curriculum at the non-public, maybe a brick and mortar, then you will be eligible. So in essence, they are treated the same. It's just the environments are going to be different.
On January 15th, will there be a website form for parents to apply for the PCTC? I like that, the Parental Choice Tax Credit, or for the advanced payment.
So that's why we gave you guys the TAP instructions. You are going to be able to use your registration and your number and your login information to log into TAP on the 15th. And that will be the vehicle by which you will apply. Our intention is, I know this is kind of confusing, especially because you might not be familiar with TAP as an individual income tax filer, but we are planning to do outreach as we get closer. We'll make sure that we have screenshots. We're going to show you what that looks like. We're going to tell you all of the documentation and materials that you'll need to have with you at your computer when you sign up to apply.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question here. Can standardized testing materials and scoring fees qualify?
Again, we're not going to say specifics, and I know this is more of a general question, but the legislation does say that standardized testing or a version of it is a qualified expense, a qualifying expense. They did not specifically call out scoring, but if they are related, I would encourage you, and you are planning to have your student take those tests, to keep those, and it's possible that we will have additional clarification around some of those topics as we learn more.
Excellent. Several people have this next question. Excuse me. Kindergarten might not include all of the course subjects. What happens on that situation?
Well, the legislation is pretty specific. It says that those must be included at a minimum. I don't think that we are going to have any latitude because the legislation is specific.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight that part that you just said. We have to do whatever the legislation says as far as this is concerned. We can't interpret things. We can't make things up. Whatever it says is what we need to do. And that's why it seems weird that we can't offer explanations or answers to things, and it is simply because it's not in there. And since we can't make things up, we have to do research. We have to have meetings. We have to figure out what it is that they mean and what they intend, and we have to get that from them before we can provide answers for this stuff. But we're doing it. It just takes a bit. Regarding qualified expenses for homeschooling families, we're doing a year-long science course through a local business, not a school. We covered the 3 additional course subjects at home. Can the science course taken through the business qualify for the tax credit?
Is the standard answer for that because it's not included in your core curriculum, and so that would be no. And if we were asked, the legislation is very specific about all 4 must be included at a minimum. So whatever choices might be made, the way the law reads right now is it would have to be included and could not be offered separately.
Another one here. Is the TAP account the same as the TAP account used for Idaho State withholding and unemployment insurance? If it's for individual, yes. If you're talking about a business TAP account, we're going to want you to do an individual one, and that is because we need your information, not the business information, because we're going to go off of what you filed, not your business. So that's why we need an individual one as well. So you may end up getting 2. You have your business one already existing, you'll need to get an individual one for yourself. Okay, I have over 500 Idaho family customers. They are very uninformed about the Parental Choice Tax Credit, or PCTC. It was the same for the Empowering Parents Grant, and there are still tens of millions of unspent grant dollars. How can we get the word out to Idaho folks and get their Form 40s and their TAP accounts requirements done on time? Well, we're doing it right now, part of it. We have a lot of these that are going on. I know I am scheduling, I don't know how many of them, 6 of them in the next quarter. We have the FAQ page. We have news articles that have gone out. We have the newsletter. Word of mouth would help a great deal. If you have 500 customers, send them the link to the FAQ page. Be a little bit of a source of information for them if they have questions. If they do have questions and you can't answer them, refer them to the FAQ. If they still have questions, have them send an email. If we all work together, we can get as many people informed as possible, because I would love to have everybody informed as to what's going on here, and then nobody's left out of the dark. I have a subscription to IXL for language arts and mathematics. Would that be covered? I don't know what that is. Does anybody know what that is, IXL?
So here, Steve, here's kind of the general answer for some of the subscription information support organizations to learning. If they are tutoring support for the core courses in a base curriculum or at a non-public school, whatever the environment, those could be submitted as a qualifying expense. And the thing that I would just encourage all of you to look at, because there are some of these support organizations that actually work through public schools, and there are a lot of nuances to this. So I really would encourage you to do the research to find out if they're offered through public schools, if there's an actual enrollment there. If they're related as support tools specifically for non-public learning environments, then I would keep those receipts as a qualifying expense. But again, we're not going to be able to tell you specifically about any particular subscription or service that you're planning to use. A lot of this is really up to the parents, and I really encourage you to look at the FAQs and look at the parameters on things like the qualifying expenses, as well as the other FAQs, to determine whether or not what you have falls within those. And then to the best of our ability, if you sent us an email, we would try to be able to provide whatever information we have available for you. And I know that's not probably the definitive answer that you're looking for, but it's a new program, we're learning a lot, and as we find out more information, we're going to put it on those FAQs. And I know Steve said earlier that it feels like we're updating them daily. We're processing this information internally and vetting your questions internally every day. And then we usually put at the top of our webpage the date that we actually did do an update to the FAQs. So if you watch that and you sign up for a newsletter, you're going to be the first to know about the things that are changing or the new information that we have.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. This is a new thing for us at the Tax Commission, so this has been quite the adventure in figuring out how all of this works. So thanks to everybody for your patience and your questions, because your questions help us figure out what it is we don't know. Another question is, do I have to reapply every year? I think we've answered that, but yes, it's going to be a yearly thing. Can we get access to the slides? I will save this and post it as a PDF out on the frequently asked page. Where else? On the TAP page, where will we see the application? We haven't developed it yet, so I'm not exactly sure where it will be within TAP. But once we have that, like Julie said, we will set up information posted on the FAQ on how to do it.
Yeah, Steve, we're still, for all the folks, and we're still in testing in terms of that application, and this might be more information than you want, but before we launch anything here at the Tax Commission, we like to have it tested by people who simulate what your experience would be, and so we're still in testing, but as soon as we have that information, we will share it so you can look at it.
So I'm just thinking out loud here, Julie, would it be worth it to do maybe a webinar or two once we know that we'll just watch what it's going to look like?
Steve mentioned earlier, folks, that he is putting more out there. I think we should add it to the webinar, and I'd also like to do a video for anybody so they can just go out onto the FAQ page and click on a video. In fact, we will be doing that for Mark's presentation and Janet's. We'll have just some snippets, so if you wanted more information on how to sign up for TAP or ultimately how the application will work, we should have some videos walking you through that.
Perfect. I always want to schedule more webinars because I love to hear myself talk. Okay, excuse me. Please clarify. You indicated that to apply for the advance payment, the taxpayer must have income at or below 300% of the federal poverty level. That is different than the application for the credit application. Right. So the advance payment is kind of a Kickstarter, if you will, and that is reserved strictly for families that are at or below 300% of the poverty level. So that is for them. The tax credit also is for those folks, but it is also available for people who are above the 300% of the federal poverty level. So there is a difference there.
Steve, I just want to clarify for folks who are interested in the advance payment. So the tax credit, the Parental Choice Tax Credit, works just like your refund would. It would be, you're going to reconcile, for those applying for the tax credit, you're going to reconcile your receipts and everything when you file, which is why you may have to file an amended return if you receive the credit and you don't normally get an extension like the one caller did. So for the advance payment, the first year is actually a check. It's actually for anticipated expenses, whereas for the credit, you will have had to have paid and documented in 2025 the information about the expenses. For the advance payment, and which is why the legislature put the priority for those below, I've called it priming the pump. It would allow some families the opportunity to pay for the expenses in advance. So they're very, very different.
Okay. Our TAP page shows an account for individual income tax. Does this mean we are good to go for the application process when it starts? This is a Janet question.
And I'm going to say yes, because that's our goal with registering for TAP, is that they have an individual income tax TAP account out there.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Our school uses different accrediting body than what Idaho is accepting, but we cover all 4 core subjects and also keep portfolios of growth and work. How do our families provide the proof of work and growth to the state during the application process? Will it need to be provided during the application process or in review of funds? A great question.
So this really leaves it up to the parents to be responsible for those things. So you'll want to have in hand documentation of the accreditation because the legislation is not specific. And then you'll want to keep any and all records related to your student's progress. They don't say it's an or, it's either or. So if you're accredited, you'll want documentation. If it's not accredited, then you'll want to have your learning record. But folks, we're just encouraging you to keep any and all documentation related to this program for the first year because it is important that if you're asked about any of those things, that you're able to provide the proof.
Yep. Another one here, are private schools required to provide enrolled families with receipts of expenses paid? I think as a parent, I would require a receipt for anything that I've paid, but I don't know if they're required to by law.
And we don't have anything in this law that requires that.
But yeah,
so,
as a parent, I would demand that because you're going to need those, right?
So I will tell you that I've had some questions from parents where they've asked, can I just have my school provide on letterhead a list of things I've paid for? And the answer is no. You do need to have an actual receipt or a paid invoice showing that you actually paid money for that expense. So while we're not going to go and verify folks' individual schools, as parents, you should ask for something that is going to be much like you would receive if you pay for your groceries at the grocery store. You've got the location of the store, it has the phone number, it has the date, it has everything listed out, or at least an identifiable way to identify what was paid for. And on the business side of taxes, we would ask businesses to provide those same things for their expenses. So I think if you want to do this, you should make sure that your non-public school is providing you good documentation about what is required.
Excellent, thank you. We've had this question a couple of times. What are qualifying disabilities?
So I would just encourage you to send an email to the parental choice at tax.idaho.gov, and then one of the team will send you back exactly what the law says about disabilities and what's required in order to apply and be eligible.
So that's for Villani and Brett, both. I know you both asked that question, okay? We need more guidance on private school students participating in public school sports. The public school decides that if the student is enrolled in their school or not.
Yeah, that's exactly, and it's not the same across the board in Idaho. If they are enrolled, the law specifically says that the student is not eligible for the credit in the semester in which they're enrolled.
Yeah, Jenna, if you have something to add, go ahead.
I just wanted to back up for a minute on that question that was asked that said, our TAP account shows an individual account, and I jumped in and said absolutely. I just want to clarify, make sure that that TAP account that says individual is tied to the Social Security numbers that are going to be requesting the parental choice credit. Does that make sense?
That's a good point, yeah.
Okay.
All right. When can you apply for the advance payment? I know this one. It's going to start January 15th, same as the tax credit. All of that will open up on January 15th. Oh, here's a good one. If someone other than the parent pays tuition costs for private school, must the payment come from the custodial parent?
I think the best way to deal with that is to ensure that the documentation reflects that the expense was paid by the person who applies for the credit. As I've told several folks, we're not going to get into the administration that goes on behind whatever happens, but if you are asked for documentation or it's reviewed and verified, it's going to have to be the person who applied for it being recorded as the person who paid for it.
Yeah. Another concern here. Allowable expenses include tutoring, but how can a parent be confident that they will be reimbursed for tutoring if there is no way for tutors to qualify?
So we're not actually going to qualify your tutors, but you do need to provide documentation that you paid for tutoring in one of the 4 core subjects.
Yeah, math, stuff like music and that kind of stuff, or coaching for sports are not going to qualify. So.
And we're not going to be qualifying your tutors if. As I said before, if you're making decisions as a parent to ensure that your student meets the needs and requirements of the curriculum, I'm guessing that with or without this tax credit that you would have made those decisions, and I would encourage you to let those decisions guide what you would document and provide if you are awarded the advance payment or the tax credit.
Thank you. Do you need a portfolio of evidence if your student is homeschooled in Idaho, or is that only for out-of-state schools and students?
Nope, that is required. You either must show accreditation for the program or the portfolio of evidence.
Yeah, regardless of where they're at. Yeah. My children participate in sports with the city, not a school system. Is this something that can be covered?
So the law says that it will pay for those things related to the 4 core subjects. That would not be a qualifying expense.
Yeah. And then the biggest expense for homeschoolers are things like music and other classes that are not covered. Okay. And then a follow-up to that is the core curriculum is the least expensive. Yeah.
Those are statements. I'm assuming those are statements of fact.
Yeah.
So we'll just keep moving.
Yeah. So on January 15th, wait a minute. So, Shannon chimed in. On January 15th, will the application be up at midnight or 9 a.m.? Do you know what time? Thanks for doing this. We do not know yet. I wish we did, because I get this question a lot. I guess you just kind of keep checking in. Well, we know that it will be the 15th. I don't know exactly when yet. If we do know, do you know where we'll put it? It will be on the FAQ. You're welcome, Shelby.
So, Steve, they will need to go into TAP, so they'll be signing in.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
think they're just
what it looks like at the time, we'll make sure they know.
Yeah. All right. I am gathering the next round of questions here. Give me a second. You guys are asking great questions. I know it has skipped. All right. I'm pretty sure I'm duplicating some of this. I will edit a bit. And somebody else is mentioning that electives seem to be the most expensive. I understand that. The law is written the way that the laws are written, and so we have to follow it. We use 3 different curriculum providers to create our own homeschool: math from one company, English language arts and social studies from another, and science from yet another. It sounds like none of that will qualify because it's not purchased from one single curriculum provider.
Correct.
Yeah, but if we put it all together, we have a very well-rounded full curriculum for a child. It's too bad that we may not qualify for the credits. Yeah. Unfortunately, the way that it is written, it needs to be from one provider. Is there any priority for children with disabilities, or is it only based on income?
Only based on income.
Yeah. What if a child only attended public school for 1 week and then withdrew? Is he still eligible?
So I would encourage anybody who has that situation to speak with the school about whether or not that qualifies for enrollment, because that's really what the law speaks to, is it speaks to enrollment. And then, say for example, they were in public school in between January 1st, 2025 and whatever date, May or June 2025, but then they only attended 1 week in August of 2025. It would be whether or not that school shows them enrolled in August or September of 2025 that we would go off of.
And then please confirm my understanding. If parents are doing some form of non-public schooling for their kids and have all 4 core subjects as their base curriculum, and then tutoring in support of 1 or more of these 4 core subjects, would that be a qualifying expense? I would say receipts for those.
Yeah. So one of the things, folks, and the reasons we don't answer specific questions is because we know at the Tax Commission that we never have the full picture. We get people who call us all the time and say, what about this or that? If you read the FAQs and you meet all of the qualifications that we have outlined, then I would say yes, likely those would be qualifying expenses for those tutoring, but I don't know the whole picture. For example, if they're enrolled in some, in something else. So that's why we don't get specific. And I know that that's kind of difficult sometimes for folks to understand, but really encourage you to read the FAQs and see yourself in them. And then if you do have further questions or there's a nuance, because we get a lot of questions, to email us.
Another question for Janet. Where does TAP account show individual? I'm on my profile and I cannot verify.
Okay, I'm going to say that if you're on your profile and you're not seeing individual, you're probably seeing a business permit, and you could be in a business account. I don't know that because I can't look at your account right now. I would suggest to call into our main line and let one of the reps look at your TAP account with you, but I'm going to guess that we're maybe on a business account. I hope that helps.
Yep, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are students on learning plans considered a qualifying disability? Again, we're nibbling on the edges of what is a qualifying disability, and we just don't have the answer for that yet.
Yeah, that's another one of those. You need to see what's written in the law, and so send us an email and we'll get that information for you.
What can we do if a family member helped pay our private school bills so we don't have to put it on our credit card and avoid interest? We planned on paying them back with the tax credit. They chose to pay the school directly. Will that be acceptable, or does that disqualify us from getting the tax credit?
The documentation isn't going to show that you paid the expense, and it needs to show that you paid the expense.
In order for you to submit that as a qualifying expense. Yeah. Okay. Oh, was that it? No. Really? Okay. I think that's it right now. Oh, wait, no, there's more. If a school notification of accreditation is on its website sufficient for proof of accreditation?
Well, I'm not going to, again, we can't do specifics, but I would encourage anybody who wants to apply for this to lock down as much information as they can about accreditation. Likely they have accreditation from an organization and are going to be able to provide that to you. So I suggest you get it rather than just that adage, well, it was on the internet, I should believe it must be true. So.
Did I miss anybody's question in there? I mean, there's a lot, and I think I got them all, but if I missed one, please let me know. But you guys have asked a lot of great questions.
Hey, I can't get the typing thing to work. Something's messed up. Am I allowed to talk, ask a question?
Sure. I don't know
who
you are, but yes. Oh, Joanna.
No.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Sure.
So we had someone sponsor us for the last year, and then we were paying for this year. The problem is it's based off of calendar year, is it not?
It's tax
like
year.
Your tax year. So if we pay up front, half of the money that we paid goes for this year and half of it goes for next year, correct? Or is it based off of whenever you paid the bill?
It's whenever you paid the bill. That's the documentation that you would need, just as you would for any business expense. We look at that. We look at the tax year, and we call it that, so we're all speaking the same language. January 1st through December 31st of 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, it throws a lot of people. We are not really talking about school year here because we're the tax commission, so we're talking about a tax year.
Yes. Okay. Now, if they, like, we had the money to pay it, but we would have to put up most of it on, I sent that question earlier about the interest. Like, they paid it for us, so we wouldn't have to put it on our credit card and pay interest. And that kind of messes things up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then it shows that they paid it. Now, could we get a refund from the school and then paid in full with our money?
So
how does that work?
what we would require at the tax commission is that the documentation you provide on either a paid invoice or a receipt would be that you made the payment.
Okay. Got it. And if we don't make the payment, then we don't get the tax credit.
Yeah, because it wasn't an expense that you incurred, that you paid.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
That paid. We have to make sure we don't say incur, or the auditors all come find us.
I don't want them in my office.
Yeah, paid. And actually, I kind of joke about that, folks, but it's really important. It is actually the date that it was paid. That's what the tax commission will look at. And it needs to be paid within the year that we're talking about, the tax year that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
Celeste brings up a great point. There is no guarantee that anybody's going to get this credit. We can't guarantee anybody's going to get it. You apply and then we'll see.
Yeah. And it just depends. And there's also a cap, with how much funds, so it's first come, first serve.
Yeah.
And so, but if you don't have all your documentation to file your taxes on the 15th of January, you may get pushed on that list if you're waiting for your employer to send you your information.
So here's what we recommend. It's important that you file the tax return for 2024, the Form 40. If you've already done that, great. You don't have to do it again. You need to get the individual TAP account, and then you need to start collecting your receipts, but you also need to apply, and it's okay if you apply before you have all of your tax return stuff for 2025. Remember, our look back is to 2024. We should have all of your documentation already for 2024 that determines your eligibility, so you really don't worry about that for 2025, and that's why we're saying proceed with your taxes for 2025, extension or no extension, because you can always file an amended return. Your application is based on 2024 information.
Okay, so we're basing everything on the tax return for this next tax year based off of what happened last calendar year, 2024? Is that correct?
So 2024 information is what you need in order to apply. So making application is not related to the 2025 credit that you would be applying for or the advance payment. So I'm just encouraging everybody, you should apply as soon as you are able. And you should look up what you're going to need to have in hand at the moment that we flip the switch and turn it on. And we'll tell you all that in the future. So I think we have some other questions. I don't want to make this just a back and forth between one person. So Steve, do you want to go ahead and jump back into the questions for the folks who are still out there?
So we have one that's, will receipts that include late fees or payment card fees be eligible for PCTC?
That's a brand new question.
It is.
I do not know. That's a question that, send us that one in the parental choice, and we should probably ask for clarification on that one.
So yeah, Shelby, if you could send that to parental choice at tax.idaho.gov, we can get that over to the research folks. Great question. And then we have another one here. What if your adjusted gross income ends up being above the 300% poverty level, but it was below in 2024?
So remember what I said, eligibility is based on your 2024 Idaho Individual Income Tax Form 40 return that you filed, and the 2024 poverty chart. So that's what we're going to be looking at in terms of eligibility.
Excellent. Any other questions? You guys have been outstanding this time. It's like 6 pages of questions.
And I think we got to all of them.
I think so.
Yeah, and if you folks think of something afterwards, please do send something to the email. We're happy to get back to you or point you to the right place in the FAQs.
Yep. Well, here's what I'll do. This is all we have right now. It's just the questions. If we've got everybody's questions, we're done.
Thanks, Darren.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Shannon. All of you said thanks. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for taking an interest. Thanks for the great questions.